Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly through the creaking doors of a medieval brothel where the rush of silk skirts, candle smoke, and fermented sweat hangs thick in the air. You hear a man laughing, a door slam, the clink of coins changing hands. But beyond all that, in a candlelit corner where scent and shame blur together, something far worse is happening. A girl has just uncorked a bottle. Not wine, not vinegar, alcohol, not the kind you drink, not anymore. The kind that stings, bites, and makes you question the very meaning of cleanliness. She dips a rag in it, winces, and disappears behind a heavy curtain. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You duck beneath the curtain and follow her. Not in a creepy way, just historically curious. Her name is Margaret, or at least that's what the clients call her. You're not sure if it's real, and you won't ask. She kneels beside a chipped wooden basin, not filled with water, because water is suspect in this town, but with rags, wool, and a bottle of something that smells like it could strip paint, a blend of old wine, distilled spirits, and maybe a few crushed herbs. Some call it aquavit. The girls call it the burn. Margaret lifts her shift, rolls her eyes toward the ceiling, and braces herself. Because this isn't a bath, this is survival. You wouldn't call it sterile. The cloth is grayed from overuse. There's a faint scent of mold under the sting of the alcohol. Still, it's better than nothing. Better than infection. Better than the rumors of cursed women whose scent drove customers away like bad omens. This, Margaret was told, keeps her fresh, keeps her pure enough for the church to ignore her work, and for her clients to come back without complaint. It also leaves her skin red, raw, and tingling for hours. And she's not alone. In brothel rooms across medieval Europe, this ritual of burning cleanliness played out again and again, with alewives' spirits, herbal tinctures, or even spoiled wine soaked in linen. Mainstream fact: medieval prostitutes, unlike most of the population, were often forced to practice ritual hygiene, not out of health awareness, but because guilds, city councils, or brothel keepers demanded it. It was less about protecting the women and more about protecting the city's economy from a feared outbreak. Fringe tidbit: some believed that applying strong spirits to the genitals cleansed sin from the flesh, a symbolic scrubbing away of temptation before and after each encounter. You sit on a stool and watch Margaret wince as she presses the damp cloth to her skin. It sizzles like a whispered confession. Her knuckles go white. Then she exhales slowly, like she's letting the pain out in controlled drips. The smell is hard to describe. Not sharp like modern alcohol. More vinegary, fermented, earthy, like a rotting apple mixed with rosemary. She says it's a mix prepared by the madam, who swears by a sacred ratio of distilled barley wine and dried mint. But Margaret suspects it's whatever was left in the storage cellar that hadn't yet attracted rats. She rubs carefully, methodically front, then inner thighs, then where skin meets skin in sticky, secret places. There is no towel, no soap, only the bottle, the rag, and the idea that this will somehow keep the plague away. Historians still argue whether this practice had any real medical value. On one hand, alcohol does kill bacteria, if strong enough. On the other hand, the stuff used here likely sat open for weeks, grew mold on the cork, and burned more skin than it saved. Still, it made clients feel better. That was the point. You hear a voice outside the curtain, someone calling for her. A regular, by the sound of it. Margaret sighs, dabs a little of the alcohol on her neck like perfume, and stands. But she doesn't rush. She stands still for a moment, legs apart, letting the alcohol dry like armor. It won't stop what's coming, but it gives her the illusion of choice. Let's rewind just a little. Where does this ritual begin? It begins in the regulations posted by city officials, particularly in places like Venice, Paris, and London. Public brothels were often licensed, taxed, and policed, not to protect the workers, but to keep disease and scandal contained. Some required weekly inspections. Others simply enforced that girls must present themselves cleanly and a fresh scent. No further details offered. So women made do. Some soaked linen in wine and vinegar. Others used distilled spirits, often illegally made, brewed by local alewives. These brews weren't for drinking. They were for wiping, douching, rinsing, and sometimes hiding the smell of worse things. You hear stories, whispered between the girls, about using warm wine and crushed garlic, about urine rinses, about madams who forced their workers to scrub with burnt salt and lemon peel. You wince. One girl claims she knew someone who used turpentine, believing it would tighten the gate. She lost sensation for 2 weeks. Margaret doesn't speak of these things. She just wipes, breathes, and prays to no one in particular. The brothel is quiet now. Most of the men have either passed out or gone home to their wives. Only the heavy ones remain, the ones who always ask for Margaret. She's ready now. Her shift is straight. Her legs are pink from scrubbing, and her hands smell like a tavern floor. Before stepping out, she glances at a small mirror bronze, warped but honest. She checks her hair. She checks her smile. She checks the one place that never gets checked by anyone but herself. And when she steps into the hallway, she walks tall. Because in a world that robs you of dignity, sometimes a burning cloth and a bottle of foul wine is all you have to fight with. And fight she does. Night after night, you stay behind for a moment, studying the basin. The bottle wobbles when you touch it. The rag steams faintly in the cold air. There's a faint reddish tinge at the bottom. It's not just alcohol. It's skin. It's hope. It's defiance soaked in liquid pain. You reach for the cork, but think better of it. Some bottles are better left closed. The hallway creaks as Margaret disappears into the haze of candlelight and murmured offers. You stay behind in the small antechamber, still catching traces of the stinging wine on the air, the sharpness of it clinging to the rag like regret. But you don't linger. Your feet carry you further into the brothel, deeper into its woven maze of velvet curtains, low ceilings, and perfume-thick air. You pass a row of doors, each numbered crudely with chalk, each pulsing with its own breath of human heat. Somewhere, a lute plays out of tune. Somewhere else, a girl coughs into her hands and hides it with laughter. You reach the far end, where the dressing corner sits like a shrine to half-hearted vanity. The air here is different, hotter, more sour, and faintly floral in the way old flowers smell when they've sat too long in still water. This is where the girls prepare, not for war, but close enough. There's a shared mirror, barely larger than a dinner plate, with hairline cracks along one edge. A chipped basin with tepid water, and in the middle of the bench, like a relic on an altar, sits the shared comb. Wooden, stained, missing several teeth. You've arrived at the hair station. You glance around. A young girl sits near the hearth, scratching her scalp with both hands and muttering something about feeling the wig crawl again. Her name is Carrie's. Her curls are matted at the root, and her breath smells faintly of boiled onions and pipe smoke. She lifts a wig from the table and gives it a shake. A small something falls out. It skitters across the stone floor. You decide not to follow it. Margaret is back now, seated with one leg tucked beneath her, running her fingers through her dampened hair. She nods toward the comb. "You first," she says to Carrie's, smirking. And Carrie's brave soul obliges. She takes the comb with reverence, as if it were some sacred object passed between generations of suffering women, which, in a way, it is. She starts at the front, dragging the wooden teeth slowly through the grease-clumped strands. It snags. She yanks. She mutters. You wince. Mainstream fact. In the medieval world, hair was considered both sensual and spiritual, and for prostitutes, it was also a currency. Clients had preferences: long golden curls, tight chestnut braids, jet black with silver threads like moonlight. It didn't matter if it was real, as long as it looked good from across the room and held up under candlelight, which is why wigs and extensions were shared, combed, styled, and worn in rotation like shift dresses or corsets. The problem: lice. So many lice. The comb you're watching now has teeth that are barely holding on. Each drag through the scalp dislodges a flake of skin, a tangle of hair, or something that moves. Margaret takes her turn next. She winces as the comb bites her temple. She doesn't flinch. This is normal. Fringe tidbit. Some brothels kept onion juice or goose grease near the comb station, smeared behind the ears in hopes it would suffocate the lice. Others swore by crushed rose petals and pig lard, mashed together and rubbed along the scalp. And the smell It lingers. It's not bad exactly, but not quite floral. More tragic. You take a seat nearby, pretending to examine a cracked hand mirror, while the girls pass the comb between them. One of them finds a silver louse and flicks it into the fire without a word. Historians still argue whether wigs were required in lower-class brothels or reserved for higher-end courtesans. But one thing is certain. Hair hygiene was rarely actual hygiene. It was performance, the illusion of beauty, a flick of the wrist, a quick rinse in mead, a dusting of flour to simulate pale elegance. And then back on your head it goes. One girl, older than the rest, lifts her wig and carefully sets it on the shelf beside a candle. She turns to you and whispers, "Don't look too close." It bites. You're not sure if she's joking. She lifts a cloth soaked in elderflower water and pats her scalp, wincing at a tender spot behind the ear. "Boil," she mutters, "too much sugar wine and not enough sleep." You nod politely, as if you understand the connection. You do not. The dressing bench creaks as three girls lean toward the mirror at once, trying to catch a glimpse of themselves in the same shard of reflection. One adjusts her ribbon. Another smooths her eyebrows with spit and a fingertip. The third stares a little longer, her eyes not quite seeing. You realize that in this one corner, amid all the filth and fuss, they are still trying, still performing, still finding a sliver of self in a world that rents their bodies by the hour. The comb is passed again, its handle warm from use. A final stroke through Margot's hair dislodges something sticky. She wipes it on the underside of the bench. You pretend not to see. In the corner, Carrie's has begun braiding her hair. The strands are uneven, the color sun-faded, but she hums while she works. A lullaby, maybe, or something older. The tune loops like a comfort blanket. Another girl pins her wig in place with bent metal clips and a squirt of something that smells suspiciously like watered-down egg yolk. You ask her what it is. She shrugs, whatever makes it stick. She leans close to the mirror, not to check her hair this time, but to whisper to herself. Just a single word. You can't hear it, but it sounds like a name. And then the bell rings. It's muffled, but unmistakable. Clients again. The girls stand in unison, brushing stray hairs from their sleeves. Wigs secured, lice temporarily conquered, braids relooped, perfume reapplied, lavender and lye and regret. The comb is left on the bench, still warm, still wet, still waiting for the next round. And as the girls file out one by one, you feel its eyes on you. Not really, but sort of. You pick it up for a second. It's heavier than it looks, like it's carrying every story ever whispered under this roof. You set it back down, gently. Tomorrow, it will bite again. The door swings closed behind the girls, leaving behind only candlelight, a few drifting hairs, and the quiet sizzle of a forgotten ember in the hearth. You take one last glance at the dressing corner, and then turn toward the hallway, where the scent of perfume fades, and something earthier takes its place. The floorboards grow rougher beneath your feet. The warmth of the fire gives way to a damp chill that seeps up from the stone below. You follow the curve of the wall, past the linen cupboard, and down a short flight of steps that creak like they're warning you. At the bottom is a room with no windows, just a wooden door with a rusted latch, and beyond it, the feed room. They don't call it that, of course, but it is. You open the door, and there they are. 6 pairs of feet propped on stools, toes splayed, ankles bruised from laces too tight for too long, and the smell, not quite foul, not quite sour, but unmistakably ancient, like boots left too close to a fire, or damp wool that forgot the sun existed. You step inside quietly. The women here are quieter too, tired, barefoot. One is plucking straw from her stockings. Another is rubbing her heel with something that looks like wax scraped from a candle. This is where the glamour breaks down. The shoes they wear, pointed, curled, beautiful, are the kind you pose in, but not the kind you clean. Leather stiff with age, soles worn thin, linings patched with cloth scraps and dried leaves. Many haven't been washed in months, if ever. Margaret sits by the wall, removing her boots with a grunt. Her stockings peel away like second skin. She inspects a reddened blister and sighs. Still better than last winter, she mutters. Mainstream fact, medieval people rarely washed their feet, even in the bath. Feet were considered the lowest part of the body, both literally and spiritually, and often ignored during hygiene rituals unless they hurt too much to walk. Fringe tidbit: some women rubbed lard or old wine dregs into cracked heels, believing it softened the skin and kept the rot from setting in. Others simply ignored the pain, stuffing wool between bleeding toes and hoping their shift lasted less than an hour. Margaret reaches into a bucket and pulls out a cloth still damp from earlier. She presses it between her toes and hisses. The others chuckle softly. "You should have soaked them in vinegar," one says. "She should have married a blacksmith," another adds. "They never complain when you smell like iron." Laughter, brittle and brief. You glance at their feet again. Nails yellowed or broken. Soles blackened with dust and ash. One girl, quiet, barely older than a child, has a fungus blooming between her smallest toes. She doesn't seem to notice. No pedicures here. No rose-scented oils. Just survival wrapped in wool. Historians still argue how often brothel workers tended to their feet, or whether foot care was reserved only for elite courtesans who had clients with specific tastes. Some accounts suggest foot washing was part of foreplay. Others treat it as an afterthought, like trimming candle wicks or shaking out the sheets. In this room, it feels like both. The youngest girl dips her foot in a basin of tepid water. Her skin puckers instantly. She flinches, but leaves it there, eyes fixed on a crack in the floor. Another woman leans over with a dull blade, scraping dry skin from her heel. The shavings fall like snow. You blink and try not to think about where that blade's been. The only thing close to a salve in this room is a small tin of pig fat mixed with dried mint. Margaret takes a fingerful and massages it into her arch with practiced rhythm. It keeps the skin from splitting, she says. It keeps the men from gagging, someone else adds. More laughter. But it's true. Clients notice everything. Smell, texture, moisture. No one likes a girl with peasant feet, the madam once said, which is rich, considering they walk through the same muck as the rest of the city. So the girls do what they can. They scrape, rub, patch, hide. They smear garlic-soaked wool between toes. They line their shoes with ashes and rosemary, hoping it masks the mildew. They stitch soft rabbit fur into the soles until it rots and falls apart. And when all else fails, they bathe their feet in old mead, swearing it keeps the skin sweet. It doesn't, but it smells better than the alternative. You sit on a low stool beside Margaret and notice the bruises on her ankles. She catches your eye and shrugs. Laced too tight, she says. Then, grinning, but it makes the legs look thinner. There's vanity here, too. A glimmer of pride beneath the grime. These women want to look beautiful, even if they're falling apart at the seams. Their bodies are products. Their feet are just another shelf to dust. The girl beside you sneezes. She wipes her nose with the same cloth she just used on her heel. You try not to judge. In this place, multi-purpose is survival. Time passes. The fire crackles, feet dry. Stockings are wrung out and hung over chairs. Someone hums a lullaby again, maybe the same one from earlier. It sounds softer now, less sad. You realize there's a rhythm to this ritual. It's not about hygiene. Not really. It's about the few minutes before the next knock. The quiet between storms. The girls lean their heads against the wall. They let their toes breathe. They laugh in half sentences. They complain about corns. They pretend, just briefly, that they aren't for sale. You rise quietly and leave them there, feet bare, faces tired, and eyes closed. The door shuts with a soft thump, and the smell lingers. You follow the curve of the hallway again, slow and careful, past a slumped wooden shelf where someone's corset lies, half folded beside a broken comb, and a crust of bread. The walls here are breathing warm, wet, and softly wheezing from the heat of so many bodies behind so many thin doors. You pause outside one of them. It's cracked open, just enough to let out the scent of sweat-soaked linen and something sharper, like boiled cabbage, left too long on the hearth. Inside, two girls are dressing or undressing. It's hard to tell. They're halfway into their shifts, the fabric limp, and wrinkled from too many nights hung over too few beams. And beneath the shifts, nothing, absolutely nothing. You step in quietly, just as one girl tightens the last strap on her bodice with a wince. The string digs into her skin, rubbing against a raw, reddish sore just above her ribs. It's not the first or the worst. Tonight, you're learning about bodices, boils, and the medieval refusal to wear underwear. The girl closest to the door is named Lynn. She's older than most here. Her smile lines are starting to show, and there's a quiet steadiness to the way she moves. Her corset is stained in patches and missing 2 hooks. It doesn't matter. It still does its job. Tightens, lifts, conceals. She sits on the edge of the bed, lifting one arm to check under her breast, where the fabrics rubbed her raw. She dabs the sore with something from a jar. It smells like beeswax and rosemary and regret. Mainstream fact. Underwear for women was rare to non-existent in most of medieval Europe. A few wealthier ladies wore linen drawers, but for the working poor, and especially sex workers, it was bare below the waist, always. Fringe tidbit. Some brothels had rules requiring workers to go uncovered beneath their shifts to prove they weren't hiding signs of disease, or to make encounters faster. Efficiency over modesty. Always. Alin leans forward and grabs her bodice laces. The fabric has stiffened with old sweat and starch. It squeaks as she moves. You glance around the room. There are no clean clothes, only layers of dirty ones. Petticoats, chemises, corsets, and overskirts all draped across chairs or balled in corners. A low fire crackles in the hearth, trying to dry a pair of stockings that still smell like wet earth. A younger girl barefoot and still half asleep tries to flatten the wrinkles out of her only dress by pressing it between the mattress and her knees. It doesn't work. She lifts her shift, turns her back to Alin, and asks her to check something. Alin sighs. You peek over her shoulder. It's a boil just under the lower spine, where the bodice pinches too tight and the sweat never quite dries. It's red, angry, and already weeping a little. Alin presses it gently. The girl hisses, "Don't touch it." Alin touches it again anyway. Better it drains now than bursts on the client's lap. They both laugh, weakly. Historians still argue whether prostitutes received more medical care than other women, or less. In regulated brothels, some cities required monthly health checks, but most were cursory, at best quick glances, whispered questions, a midwife who didn't want to be there. Real care, that came from each other, from jars of dried calendula, from warmed cabbage leaves pressed against the thigh, from slicing open boils with a sewing needle sterilized in candlelight. You watch Alin do exactly that. Her fingers steady, her expression blank. The younger girl bites a corner of her shift and whimpers as the pus oozes out. There's no bandage, just a square of linen repurposed from a torn sleeve. It's tucked gently into the waist of the bodice to keep it from rubbing. It won't hold. You notice the absence of undergarments more acutely now. The freedom of movement has a cost. Sweat pools, cloth chafes, sores grow. One girl pulls on her corset, wincing as the stiff edge rubs the crease between her hip and groin. She mutters something about needing more lard. Another girl adjusts her shift, which has begun to yellow under the arms. She tries to rub it with chalk dust. It just smears. A knock at the door. Not a client, just the laundry girl, delivering a pile of fresh linens. She drops them on the bed, wrinkled and still damp. Sun never came out today, she says, shrugging. The fresh linen smells like mildew, smoke, and lemon balm. No one thanks her. Alin lifts one of the pieces and holds it to her chest. It's still cool. She presses it between her thighs, just for a moment, to soak up the sweat before getting dressed again. You wonder how many of these dresses have been worn without a break for days. How many layers trap the heat, the moisture, the smell? The younger girl, whose boil is now loosely bandaged, asks Alin to tie her bodice. She lifts her arms above her head, revealing red marks in her armpits from a rash that never healed properly. Alin laces her up quickly, firmly, like tying up a parcel. You'll be stiff by midnight, she says. I'm already stiff, the girl replies. They both chuckle, tired, but still amused. You scan the room once more before leaving. A pot of rendered tallow sits near the hearth, half melted. They smear it on the inside of their shifts to reduce friction. It helps, but only a little. There are no bras, no bloomers, just skin against fabric, fabric against skin, and in between sweat soars. The slow warping of bodies shaped by corsets, customers, and corners with no privacy. Alin reties her own bodice, pulling the laces tight until her ribs creak. She stands tall. You smell fine, someone says. She smiles. Then it's time to work. And so they go one by one out the door, straight-backed and cinched tight. Beneath their dresses, nothing but skin, raw in places, rubbed in others, and just clean enough to pretend. You linger for a moment longer in the empty room. The candle wax runs down the table. The rag used to press the boil lies crumpled on the hearth. The corset hook still hangs from the chair like a crooked finger. And the stink, it stays. You step back into the hallway as the last girl disappears into the corridor of red curtains and returning clients. The air shifts again, less of the sour sweat and starch from the dressing room, and more of the brothel's signature perfume, rosewater, burning tallow, and the faintest trace of old blood. Not from violence, from cycles. Because no one stops bleeding just because the schedule says they should. You follow a side passage now, toward a room quieter than the rest. No laughter, no moaning, just the creak of a wooden bucket, the rustle of cloth, and the muffled sigh of discomfort. This is where the girls go when they're bleeding. Not away from work, just to prepare for it. Tonight, you're about to witness the deeply personal, deeply improvised world of medieval menstrual care, and what it means to stuff scraps of wool between your legs while someone waits with a coin outside the door. The girl here is small. You've seen her before, maybe near the hearth, maybe in the bath line. She's nameless to most, just the quiet one. Tonight, she sits on the floor near the bed, cross-legged, bent over a pile of fabric like she's sewing a prayer. She isn't. She's choosing the cleanest rags. Scraps of linen, torn shifts, washed until the fibers barely hold together, then dried over the fire, where they stiffen into something resembling bandages or scrolls. She selects one. It's off-white, frayed at both ends, but dry. She folds it carefully into a long strip, thick in the center, then tucks it up between her thighs with the slow resignation of someone who's done this hundreds of times. There is no string, no pin, no adhesive, just pressure, just layers, just hope that it stays. Mainstream fact: medieval women used rags as makeshift sanitary napkins, hence the term on the rag. These cloths were washed and reused, often without soap, and stored in bundles between use, sometimes under beds, sometimes near the fire, sometimes with herbs to freshen them. Fringe tidbit: some poorer women, including prostitutes, used moss, soft grass, or wool scraps when cloth was too valuable to waste. These were stuffed inside shifts, or even wedged between folds of undergarments. When undergarments existed, you watch as the girl stands to test her balance. The rag shifts slightly, so she adjusts it, pressing it more firmly against her skin. It sticks, not because of magic, but because of dampness. Historians still argue how often women changed these makeshift pads, or if they changed them at all during long shifts. Some records suggest brothel girls doubled up fabric and worked straight through. Others hint at rest nights, but only when illness or visible bleeding frightened the clients away. No such night tonight. She moves toward a shelf near the wall and lifts a small pouch. Inside, dried lavender, maybe, or crushed sage. She sprinkles a pinch onto the fabric between her legs, wincing slightly as it hits a sore spot. It keeps the scent soft, she whispers, mostly to herself. The madam used to insist on that. Bleed if you must, but bleed pretty. The rag already has spots on it, old stains that never washed out. She says they're from last time, or the time before. She doesn't know anymore. She picks up another one, fresher, smaller. She folds it and lines the front of her shift with it, just in case. You notice a pot of sheep's tallow and juniper oil on the nearby shelf. It's rubbed onto thighs to soothe the chafing that comes from hours of moving with wet cloth between tender skin. It doesn't help much, but it gives the illusion of care. The girl dips 2 fingers in the balm, rubs it along the crease of her leg, and exhales. Then she lifts her shift, smooths the fabric back into place, and stands straighter. The rag shifts again, but it holds. She wraps a string of red beads around her wrist just once, a small signal to other girls. Be careful. Not because she's contagious, but because no one wants to stain the sheets. It's extra laundry, extra shame. The madam notices. Sometimes clients do too. You hear the girls talk about that in whispers, behind closed doors. Some men hate it. Others request it. You try not to think about which is worse. She walks to the curtain and peeks out, then back at you. You can stay if you help, she says. You nod. She hands you a stack of used cloths, stiff with old blood, and folded carefully, as if dignity could be preserved with tidy corners. She gestures to the basin. You rinse. The water goes pink, then red, then brown. You don't speak. She adds firewood beneath the pot, warms a clean bucket of water, then soaks another bundle in it to soften before the next round. Everything is reusable. Everything is on rotation. There is no disposable, only used and drying, only working and waiting. You glance at the bed nearby. The sheets are lined with another cloth, thick and dark. A safeguard, a silent partner in her work. She doesn't look ashamed. She doesn't look proud, just resigned. Like this is one more part of the job. Like breathing, like smiling, like bracing herself for whatever comes next. And when she finishes tying her bodice again, she gives herself a final check, patting the sides of her thighs, making sure the rag hasn't shifted. Then she nods. She's ready. She steps out through the curtain and disappears into the torchlight beyond. You remain for a moment, holding the cloth you just washed. It's heavier than it looks. Behind you, the fire crackles. The pot bubbles, and the scent of iron lingers in the air, tinged faintly with lavender. You set the cloth on the line, next to half a dozen others. And you wonder, not for the first time tonight, how something so natural can feel so difficult. You head down the rear hallway now, deeper into the bowels of the building, past the main parlor, past the kitchen, where onions hang limp from a nail, past the room where linens go to dye. Every step feels softer somehow. Wetter, the wood here never fully dries. Eventually, you reach a door that looks like it's holding in a secret. It creaks open, and you find yourself in what might generously be called a washroom, though calling it that implies something sanitary or organized or remotely pleasant. This room is neither. This is the inner thigh and groin situation room, the emergency ward for itches that won't quit, for rashes that spread like rumors, for mystery bumps, weeping sores, and heat that radiates from beneath the hem of a skirt. Welcome. There's already a girl here. You recognize her from the stairwell, freckles, red hair, walk like a pirate. She's got one leg up on a stool and a mirror angled on a crate. She's squinting, head tilted, fingers gently parting the folds of her inner thigh to examine a rash the color of boiled beetroot. Not again, she mutters. Another girl nearby is crushing herbs in a mortar, marigold, rosemary, maybe something stronger. The paste is thick, green, and oddly cheerful looking. She spoons it into a rag and presses it against her own groin. Hissing through clenched teeth, you've stepped into a war zone. And the enemy is friction, sweat, body heat, and poor decisions. Mainstream fact: groin rashes and inner thigh infections were incredibly common among medieval prostitutes, caused by sweat, fabric chafing, sexually transmitted diseases, and unwashed bodies packed into small spaces for hours. Fringe tidbit: some women swore by applying pigeon droppings mixed with vinegar to cool the skin. Others used mud from holy wells, hoping its sanctity might cure what medicine couldn't. Historians still argue whether these women knew the cause of their conditions or simply blamed it all on bad humors. Either way, their cures often involved heat, pressure, and an alarming amount of bravery. The redhead shifts on her stool. She reaches for a sliver of soap, probably lye-based, certainly rough, and starts rubbing the inner thigh like she's trying to erase herself. She winces. Should have used the lamb fat, someone calls from behind a curtain. I'm out, she snaps. Then try cabbage. I left one in the basin. Yes, cabbage. Split in half, warmed by the hearth, and slapped directly onto the offending area like a wet poultice of leafy shame. You hear her mutter something about preferring the sting to the smell. She tries the cabbage anyway. A third girl enters, waddling slightly. She looks exhausted and leans against the wall before pulling up her skirt. Her thighs are slick, shiny, coated in what smells like lard mixed with mint. You burn, the redhead asks. Every time, the girl says. Client wanted to use honey. A pause. Did it work? Not for me. They all laugh, because it's that or cry. You notice an old wooden tray beside the wall. It holds tools, tweezers, dull scissors, a broken razor, and a stick of burnt sugar. They use it to remove hair sometimes, not for beauty, but because the heat and sweat cause less irritation when there's nothing to trap it. Or so they think. One girl tried it on half her groin and never walked straight again. They still joke about it, the diagonal strip special. You duck as someone tosses a damp rag across the room. It lands with a slap on the edge of the mirror. The girl on the stool sighs and picks it up. It smells faintly of chamomile. She dabs her rash, glancing at you without much interest. You looking for cures? You shrug. Then remember this, she says. Don't wear wool down there. Ever. The mortar girl passes around a witch hazel tincture she swiped from the local apothecary. It stings, but it dries the sores faster. They share it like wine. No one asks how she got it. You suspect favors were exchanged. Not the fun kind. There's a bucket of cool water in the corner. One by one, the girls dip cloths into it and gently sponge their inner thighs, mopping up the heat, the ooze, the salt that builds up when skin never gets a break. You see the line marks red as rope burns. Some wear rags tied between their legs as padding. Others just suffer through. One girl sits in a shallow basin, sighing deeply as she lowers herself into water that's barely lukewarm. I wish we had salt, she says. I wish we had wine, someone else replies. They settle for rosemary sprigs and a few drops of lavender oil. You crouch down beside the girl with the cabbage leaf. It's already wilted, turning limp against her skin. She peels it off and folds another one in half. Rotten skin's better than raw, she mutters. The redhead finishes checking her rash and nods approvingly. Less red, she says. Might still work tonight. Might, someone echoes. You don't ask what happens if it doesn't. You suspect it involves cotton wool and lies. As the fire flickers low, they begin to dress again. Soft linens first, powdered with dried clay or ash to soak up any moisture. No underwear, just friction. Controlled, anticipated, braced for. They pass around a tin of stale beeswax mixed with crushed garlic, claiming it keeps things from festering. It doesn't, but it smells potent enough to ward off demons, which is good enough for tonight. The redhead glances in the mirror once more, then tugs her skirt down. Pretty enough, she says. You look at her rash, her eyes, her tired smile, and you believe her. The door creaks open again. More girls arrive, some limping, some scratching, some silent. They take their places. They lift their skirts. They prepare for another round in the ring. The room smells like bruised herbs, burnt oil, and bravery. And the fire keeps crackling. Because the fire always keeps crackling. You return to the corridor, nostrils still tingling with the scent of vinegar and wilted cabbage. The hallway sighs underfoot, every board soft with age and secrets. At the far end, behind a curtain patched with 3 different fabrics, a low humming rises. It's the sugar boil room, not for candy, not for tea, for hair removal, for smoothing the legs, arms, bellies, and yes, even those delicate folds where no sun reaches, but every man seems to think he owns. You hesitate a moment before entering. The air smells like burnt molasses and regret. Inside, 2 women squat on stools beside a small iron pot that bubbles quietly over coals. The paste inside is golden brown, thick, and disturbingly cheerful looking. It's sugar, lemon, water, and heat, just hot enough to scald you into silence. Welcome to medieval waxing, where smoothness is currency, pain is casual, and you have about 2 seconds to think before someone slaps a strip on your thigh and yanks it like she's pulling a rotten tooth. The older woman, Luda, is stirring with a wooden stick, watching the paste thicken. She tests a drop on her wrist, hisses softly. Too hot. The younger girl, May, rolls up her shift and props her leg on a crate. Her skin is dotted with little red bumps, some fresh, some older, like punctuation on a sentence no one wants to finish. You ready? Luda asks. May doesn't answer. She just bites her lower lip and nods. Mainstream fact, hair removal existed in medieval times, especially among sex workers. Smoothness was associated with youth, cleanliness, and purity, a laughable word in these halls, but still a selling point. They didn't have razors, not really, just boiled sugar paste, the ancestor of modern sugaring, and a willingness to endure the kind of pain that makes childbirth seem like a tickle fight. Fringe tidbit. Some used concoctions of arsenic and lime to burn hair off chemically. Others plucked with sharpened oyster shells or scorched hair with candles. Historians still argue whether the women did this for hygiene, beauty, or under pressure from clients and madams. Most agree it wasn't voluntary. It was survival. Luda scoops the first dollop of sugar with practiced fingers. She smears it onto May's thigh with a swift, flattening motion. May exhales like she's giving birth to a ghost. Hold still, Luda says. She presses a cloth strip into the paste, smooths it flat. Then rip. The sound is sharp, final, like a curtain tearing. May whimpers, and again, and again. After the third strip, her eyes glaze. After the sixth, she giggles. That one sounded like a duck, she whispers. The others snort. There's always laughter here, tiny scraps of joy pasted between the agony. Another girl enters. Strips already done. She just wants soothing salve, a thick balm made of cooled tallow, calendula, and whatever oil they haven't sold to clients for massage. She dips 2 fingers in the pot and spreads it over the red patches on her stomach. The skin peels slightly like old wallpaper. She doesn't flinch. She just says, "Smells better than me," and walks out. Luda finishes one leg and starts the other. By now, May is somewhere else entirely, eyes unfocused, lips parted, body sagging like her soul is draped over a chair. It's hard to tell if the smooth skin is worth it. But she keeps going, because clients notice. They notice stubble. They notice hair where they don't want hair. They don't say it outright, but the tips are smaller, the visits shorter. The madam frowns. Better to be bare, Luda always says, even if it leaves you raw. The sugar starts to thicken too much, so Luda moves faster, slapping it on while it's still spreadable. You notice a tin bowl nearby filled with cooled clumps of hair and sugar, balled up like dirty pearls. No one throws them away immediately. They get used again, reheated, restirred. Efficiency, even if it means a few surprise curls from the last customer. The crate May rests her leg on begins to wobble. She shifts her weight and lets the last patch get done without sound. No scream, no hiss, just one tear rolling down her cheek. The final cloth strip goes on her inner thigh, dangerously close to places where nerves tangle like thorns. Luda hesitates. "You want this one?" May shakes her head. "No one's looking there tonight." They let it be. The pot hisses softly as sugar bubbles over the rim. Luda wipes her hands on a rag already stiff with paste. Another girl walks in, holding a jar of lemon rinds and salt. "I brought the exfoliant," she says. "Put it on the shelf," Luda mutters. "We'll bleed enough without it." The air is warm and sweet and faintly burned. The girls stretch their legs, red and gleaming like meat from the smokehouse. They pat each other's thighs, share one rag, dab on balm, check for missed patches. Somewhere, a client shouts something incoherent. No one flinches. They're already raw in all the ways that matter. May pulls her shift back down, runs her palm over the smoothness, smiles. "Soft like bread," she says. "Bread doesn't scream," Luda replies. The pot bubbles. The next girl sits, and the curtain falls back into place behind you. You head upstairs now, where the air shifts from sticky sweetness to something closer to mildew, lavender sachets, and candle smoke. It's quieter here. Not because it's peaceful. Peace is a foreign concept in this building, but because this is the bedroom wing. And in these rooms, voices are kept low, not out of modesty, out of fatigue. These girls don't rest between clients, they rotate. And tonight, 2 of them are hunched over a basin in one of the corner rooms. sleeves rolled, back stiff, faces set with the determined scowl of someone trying to remove the impossible. Stains on sheets, on skirts, on aprons, on thighs. Welcome to the stained scrub room, the place where dignity goes to soak. The redhead from earlier, yes, the cabbage girl, is back. She's wringing out a pale gray shift, scrubbing the hem against a stone slab like she's trying to erase time itself. Beside her, Margaret is tackling a bedsheet the color of old parchment. It's been soaked in piss, wine, and something suspiciously purple. That better be mulberries, she mutters. It's not, says the redhead. They both keep scrubbing. Mainstream fact. Medieval laundresses and brothel workers relied on primitive stain-fighting techniques. Wood ash lye, stale urine, called chamber lye, and boiling water when available. For brothel girls, removing client stains was less about hygiene and more about making the linen usable again for the next one. Fringe tidbit. Some girls believed rubbing goose fat into stubborn stains helped lift the sin. Others soaked rags in rainwater caught during storms, thinking it was purer. There's even mention of chewing certain roots and spitting the foam onto spots. Folk wisdom passed down like bedtime stories. Historians still argue whether brothel linens were ever truly clean or just rotated so frequently the illusion of cleanliness held. Some suspect that what passed for washing was really just masking the worst of it, a splash of rosewater, a sun-dry on the roof, and a quick prayer. Margaret lifts the sheet to the light. Still there, she mutters. She scrubs harder. The stone slab under her hands is smoothed by years of this. Grit, cloth, fingers, hope. You can see the curve of 1,000 failed attempts. The redhead dumps her shift into the rinse basin and starts on a pillowcase next. Smells like feet, she says. Better than the other one. What other one? The one that smells like secrets. They laugh, but not too loudly. The madam doesn't like noise in the laundry rooms. Makes the stains nervous, she once said. In the corner sits a bowl of chalk dust and crushed eggshell, mixed with rainwater and stirred into a paste. It's daubed onto especially bad patches, left to dry and brushed off later. It works sometimes. Mostly it just changes the color of the stain. Looks cleaner, Margaret says. Looks dustier, replies the redhead. Same thing at night. They share a look. They know the clients won't notice, or won't care, or will pretend not to, but the girls care. Because if the linen's too dirty, the madam finds them. It doesn't matter who made the mess. The girl always pays. A new girl enters. Her name's not important. They just call her Little B. She's young, sharp-eyed, and holding a tunic soaked through at the hips. Wine, she says quickly. Just wine. Margaret squints. That's not wine. Then maybe wine, and she stops. They don't press her, just pass her a brush and scoot over. The water in the rinse bucket is now murky. Someone suggests changing it, but no one moves. We'll wait till it thickens, someone jokes. Like soup of sins. They snort. The The laughter here is always worn thin, like overwashed linen. But it's real. Someone brings in a tin of crushed lavender heads, leftover from a client gift. They stir it into the water. Instantly, the room smells like a garden growing in a ditch. It helps. You step past a line where clothes are draped, shifts, aprons, bodices. Some are still damp, cold to the touch, sagging under their own weight like they're tired too. One piece has a red bloom near the hem. Someone tied a ribbon on it, just so it doesn't get lost in the pile. You hear a girl behind you mutter, "You can scrub all you want, but the worst stains never come out." You turn. She's dabbing vinegar on the inside of a bodice, lips pressed tight. Sometimes I think the fabric remembers. No one answers, because deep down they know she's right. The shift Margot's working on finally yields. The brown smear fades into something closer to memory. She wrings it out, flaps it once, and drapes it over the rack. "One more life," she whispers. Then she starts on the next. The redhead reaches into her apron and pulls out a folded piece of parchment, an old client note, perhaps. She dips it in the rinse water and wipes the last of the bench clean. "Recycling," she says. The others nod. Every corner, every item, every gesture here is reused, repurposed, retried. Because nothing's wasted. Except sometimes the girls. But even they scrub, even they soak, even they hope. Outside, a bell rings distant, calling, "Shift change." Margot wipes her hands and smooths her dress. "You coming?" "In a bit." The redhead stays behind, staring at the final stain. It looks like a map. But there's nowhere left to go. The bell has stopped ringing. But its echo seems to cling to the floorboards, as if it too is reluctant to move on. You follow the sound down the hall and into one of the oldest rooms in the house, a crooked little chamber tucked behind a bookshelf, barely wide enough for a bed and a basin. The ceiling here sags like it's been listening to too many secrets. The walls are stained with smoke and the residue of old prayers. And in the middle of the room, perched awkwardly on a threadbare stool, sits Carrie's, legs spread, jaw clenched, a mirror in one hand and a small knife in the other. This is not a shaving session. This is Boyle Lansing night. She doesn't flinch when you enter. "Lock the door," she says. "I'm past the point of modesty." You do. And then you watch as she carefully lowers the blade to a raw red lump nestled at the crease of her thigh, just where skin rubs skin. The boil gleams, angry and taut. She breathes in through her nose, then out, then in again, and slice. A bead of pus glistens like cream on a tart. Welcome to the darkest corner of brothel hygiene. Mainstream fact, boils and skin infections were a constant plague in medieval brothels, caused by heat, friction, poor hygiene, and the bacterial party that was medieval life. These abscesses formed often in the groin, underarms, and back of the neck. Fringe tidbit. Some women applied spider webs mixed with candle soot to the wounds, claiming it would draw out the evil. Others rubbed garlic or packed them with crushed mint, and hoped for divine intervention. Historians still argue whether these treatments helped or simply made things worse. Lancing was common, but many girls lanced each other, having no money for a physician and no time to wait for healing. Carrie grits her teeth as the boil releases. She wipes it with a cloth that's already stiff with old stains. "Third one this week," she mutters. You ask why she doesn't let it heal. She raises an eyebrow and missed 3 nights of coin. Fair point. She picks up a tin of ash and goose fat, dabs a little on the open wound. It hisses softly, like the pain itself is trying to crawl away. "I learned this from Elva," she says. God rest her thighs. You don't ask what happened to Elva. You don't need to. The air in the room is thick, hot breath, iron from the blood, wax from the candle burning low. There's no window, just one cracked mirror that multiplies Carrie's pain into 5 ghostly versions of herself. She sighs and leans back. "Boils," she mutters. "Boils and bastards. That's all this job gives you." She reaches under her shift and pats her belly. "You know they said it's from lust." You blink. She shrugs. "That's what the priest said. Lust boils the blood, brings the sores." You wonder aloud if the priest has ever lanced one. Carrie barks a laugh. Only with words. A knock at the door. Soft, coated. Carrie limps over, opens it just a crack. Outside stands a girl maybe 15, holding a bowl of crushed mustard seed. "They said this helps," she whispers. Carrie takes it, nods once. "Thanks, Dove." She closes the door. The girl is gone. You watch as she smears the mustard paste onto another swelling lump, this one on her hip. "That one's not ripe yet," she murmurs, "but I can feel it plotting." She chuckles. You don't. There's a pouch under her bed full of old tools, needle, thread, bits of twine. A spoon with the handle bent into a curve. Some were for lancing. Some were for other things. "I could open a clinic," she jokes. And she could. She's done this for herself. And for others. For years. When the madam doesn't want to pay for doctors, she sends for Carrie's. Not because she's gentle. Because she gets results. She lights a second candle and peels back a bandage on her thigh. The wound underneath looks clean. Mostly. There's a scab, crusted but calm. She smiles. That one's a success story. She reaches for a flask, takes a swig, offers you one. It tastes like licorice and nightmares, but it numbs the sting. You glance at the floor. A patch of blood has soaked into the wood beneath her stool. She shrugs. Better out than in. She looks at you. You ever lanced a boil? You shake your head. Wanna learn? You hesitate. She grins. Good. 'Cause I got one under my arm that's plotting a coup. Later, when the candles burn low and the blood is wiped clean, she presses a sprig of sage against the newest wound. For luck, she says. For healing. For the next idiot who kisses it thinking it's a birthmark. She laughs again. And in that moment, even the pain seems to pause. You linger near the threshold, just long enough to hear Carrie's humming again, some old tavern tune about sailors and syphilis, and then slip back into the hallway. The air is quieter now, cleaner, just stiller, like the house is holding its breath. You follow a trail of limp stockings and discarded garters down a crooked stairwell and into a side room you hadn't noticed before. The door creaks open with the sigh of something ancient, and inside you find the stocking shelf and its nemesis, foot rot. The room is lined wall to wall with rolled up hose, every pair a different shade of brown, gray, or yellow. Some are cotton, a few are wool. Most are thin enough to see your breath through, and all of them smell faintly of vinegar, sweat, and the kind of damp that never quite dries. A girl named Belle sits in the corner, dipping her feet into a shallow pan of water. Her toes are red, her soles are peeling, and between the fourth and fifth toe on her left foot, there's a patch of something green. Don't look at it, she says cheerfully. It gets shy. Mainstream fact. Trench foot, foot rot, and fungal infections were rampant in places where moisture and poor hygiene met tightly laced boots. Medieval prostitutes wore the same stockings for days or weeks without proper airing or washing. Combined with sweat, friction, and no soap, it was a recipe for disaster. Fringe tidbit: some girls swore by pea soaks, literally dipping their feet into stale urine to draw out the rot. Others used ash, vinegar, crushed garlic, or steeped their toes in boiled bark and clover. Historians still argue whether these treatments worked, or whether they simply distracted the girls long enough to pretend they had. Belle pulls a stocking from the shelf and shakes it out. A puff of dust escapes like a ghost. Smells better than me, she jokes, slipping it over her damp foot. You ask how often she washes them. She shrugs. Depends how much I cry that week. Another girl, Joni, walks in barefoot, carrying a tin of softened beeswax and thyme. She plops down beside Belle and starts rubbing it between her toes. Saw a monk do this once, she says. He said it was sacred. Did you kiss him? No, but I kissed his shoes. Belle cackles. They fall into an easy rhythm, kneading, drying, wrapping. You realize they know each other's feet better than most lovers. Belle peels back the stocking again. The green patch looks worse now. Think I should cut it, she asks. Joni leans in. Cut it and what? Feed it to the rats. Maybe it'll grow legs and walk away. Only if it smells better than you. Behind them, a shelf holds herbal foot powders, lavender, marjoram, ground mint, even powdered eggshell, each one labeled in spidery handwriting. Someone, at some point, thought feet mattered enough to catalog. You spot a jar labeled Blessing Dust. You raise an eyebrow. Belle winks. It's just chalk and dead daisies, but it sounds holy. She sprinkles a bit on her foot and hisses. Joni hands her a rag to bite down on. In the corner is a small brick oven used to heat stones. They wrap the warm stones in rags and press them under arches and heels to ease swelling. One stone slips from its wrapping and rolls across the floor. Catch it, Joni laughs. Belle traps it with her toes, yelping as she does, hot as Hades. That means it's working. You say that about everything, even that man with the cough. He tipped. They grin. A girl pokes her head in. Anyone seen my clean stockings? The room goes quiet. No, says Belle. No, says Joni. Did you have clean ones? The girl frowns. I think so. Then you left them in a dream. The door closes again. Belle finishes her second foot and wiggles her toes in the air. Like grapes, Joni nods. Old grapes. They let their feet dry over the little brazier, holding up their shifts like queens at a spa. The air smells of thyme, vinegar, and scorched skin. Belle stands and slips on her shoes, stuffing them with a wad of dried moss before tying the laces. Feels like walking on swamp bread, she says. Joni snorts and follows suit. Before they leave, they place their stockings back on the shelf, not the clean ones, but the ones least likely to crawl. Belle winks at you. If it smells like cheese, just say it's imported. And with that, they disappear into the hallway. You're left with the jars, the soot, and a faint impression of two girls who walked hundreds of miles in someone else's expectations and kept going, one step at a time. The hallway yawns ahead like a throat in mid-swallow, and you step lightly now, careful not to disturb the hush that has settled over the brothel's spine. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaks with the weight of a client shifting in bed, or perhaps just a memory refusing to lie still. You turn a corner and are immediately struck by the sharp tang of something sour, something earthy. It's not blood this time, nor vinegar. It's rags, soaked, hung, reused. This is the menstrual station. And yes, it smells exactly like it sounds. You duck beneath a low beam and enter the room, where three girls are crouched around a small fire. Their laps are layered with strips of old linen, some damp, some dry, all slightly frayed at the edges. One of the girls, Lean, is snipping a long sheet into even thinner strips. She licks her thumb, tests the weave, and nods in approval. Soft enough, she says, handing one to the girl next to her. The girl nods, then begins to fold, over, under, fold again. The motion is automatic. She's done it so many times the cloth could probably fold itself. Mainstream fact. Before the invention of modern sanitary pads, women in medieval Europe, including prostitutes, used rags, moss, wool, even grass to absorb menstrual blood. The most common method was to fold cloth into makeshift pads, secure it with twine or belts, and rinse it after use. Fringe tidbit. Some girls believed that burning the used cloth would please the moon. Others hid them under floorboards, worried that witches or rivals might use the blood in curses. Historians still argue whether medieval menstrual hygiene was actively managed or just passively tolerated, especially in brothels, where girls had no privacy, no breaks, and no option to say, "Not tonight." Lean finishes another strip, holds it up to the light. "Not too stained," she says. "This'll do." She hands it to the third girl, Myra, who slips it between her legs and adjusts her belt. "Still hot," Myra mutters. "You're just dramatic." "No, I mean the rag. It's fresh from the stove." Lean shrugs. Better warm than stiff. In the corner of the room is a pot of boiling water with a few crumbled herbs floating on top: lavender, thyme, maybe a slice of old orange peel, if someone was lucky enough to barter for one. The rags are dipped, rinsed, squeezed dry, but never discarded. Nothing is thrown away here, not even blood. A small wooden crate by the fire holds the clean ones, another holds the used. A third is labeled, quite optimistically, healing cloths. Lean picks one up and sniffs it. Still smells like mint. Myra leans over. Still smells like regret. They chuckle. The fire crackles. The cloth sizzles. Someone tugs at a belt that won't fasten. Someone else shifts on her stool, eyes glassy from cramps and something deeper. A girl hums softly, an old lullaby about the moon stealing secrets from women while they sleep. You realize these girls have no rotation, no day off. If you bleed, you bleed, and you work. One of the younger girls walks in holding her stomach. First time, she says quietly. The others don't tease her. They don't have the energy. They just nod and make space. Lean hands her a cloth. Use the mint one first. It distracts the nose. The girl nods, then sits. There's a strange tenderness here, not soft, not warm, but real. These girls don't coddle each other, but they survive together. They fold each other's cloths, share extra belts, press hot stones to each other's lower bellies when the pain is too much. You've seen love take many forms in this place. This might be the strangest and the strongest. Myra lifts her skirt slightly and adjusts her pad. Feels like sitting on a jellyfish, she says. At least it's not leaking. How do you know? She shifts. Oh, someone throws a cloth at her. Emergency protocol. Myra grins, presses the fresh cloth into place. You think anyone'll notice. They're not here for the bedsheets. You catch sight of a wall behind them, scribbled with tiny symbols and notes. It's a tracking calendar of sorts. Not exact, but close enough. Tiny stars mark days. Tiny dots mark danger. A heart marks a day when one of them was allowed to rest. Only one. Just one. Myra leans over, whispering to you. You know, there's a rumor. You wait. She grins. They say if you soak your cloths in red wine, your body gets confused and forgets to bleed. You raise an eyebrow. Lean scoffs. She just wants an excuse to steal wine. Myra shrugs. Still worth trying. They laugh. The kind of laugh that makes the cramps fade a little, or at least feel lighter. Before you leave, Myra hands you a folded strip. Take it. You hesitate. It's clean, she assures you. Smells like time and victory. You take it. And in that moment, holding a rag soaked in sweat, herbs, and defiance, you understand something unspoken. This is how they fight. Not with swords, not with protest, with cloth, with care, with each other. One folded corner at a time. You carry the cloth for a while awkwardly, like it might speak if you drop it, and make your way back down the corridor, where a candle flickers low, and the shadows of old footsteps press deep into the wood. The brothel is quieter now. The sun has slipped behind the soot-streaked rooftops, and the creaking above suggests the late shift has begun. The laughter is forced, the footsteps heavier. The house exhales another night into the streets, and you, still holding your scrap of victory-soaked linen, open a narrow side door that leads not to another workroom, but to the basin hall. Here, a line of chipped wooden basins are mounted along the walls. Buckets of water, some warm, most not, sit beside them. And above, nailed crookedly into the plaster, a sign reads, "One basin, one girl, 2 limbs only." This is the brothel's washing policy. And the rule is simple. You don't wash your whole body. There isn't enough water for that. So pick your 2 most profitable parts. Mainstream fact: water scarcity and rudimentary plumbing in medieval brothels meant women couldn't bathe often. Full-body washes were rare and usually reserved for wealthy clients or feast days. Instead, girls prioritized the parts of their bodies that would be seen or touched most. Fringe tidbit: some brothels had flesh fines, penalties for girls who failed to keep their presentation zones in marketable shape. A dry elbow might pass, but chapped breasts, that's a half-day's pay gone. Historians still argue whether this selective washing was enforced by madams or developed naturally out of survival instinct. Either way, the result was the same. Strategic cleanliness. You watch as a girl with calloused feet and a rose tattoo on her hip splashes cold water onto her neck and underarms. She uses a square of cloth dipped in rose water and lye, scrubs with precision, then dries off with a rag that could once have been someone's wedding veil. Next to her, another girl washes just her chest and left thigh. She catches your eye. "Clients only got one eye," she says with a wink. "Might as well save the water." The room smells like old soap, ash, and something sweet, honey maybe, boiled down into a paste for skin softening. A pot of it sits near the fire, thick and golden. Girls dip in 2 fingers, rub it into their skin, and wipe the rest onto their shifts. "Smells better than sweat," one mutters. "Not better than wine," says another. You pass a basin stained at the edges, where charcoal dust and ash have been mixed into a paste for exfoliation. A girl rubs it onto her knees with slow, circular strokes, then gasps when the cold water hits. "That's the devil's scrub," she laughs. Beside her, a pair of gloves made from scrap linen and crushed walnut shells hang drying on a hook. DIY loofahs. Brothel innovation at its finest. Another girl, not more than 17, stares into her basin. She's holding a small mirror, adjusting her chemise. She whispers, "Do you think he'll notice the bruise?" Someone answers from behind a curtain. "They always notice, but not enough to care." She nods, washes her collarbone gently. That's one of her 2. A woman with a long scar across her brow walks in late. She doesn't speak, just kneels at a basin and washes her hands and face with clay water. The basin turns brown. She doesn't care. She dries off with the hem of her dress and exits silently. Someone whispers, "She used to be rich." Someone else says, "She still is, just not with coins." The fire hisses. The water sloshes. The bodies move like rituals. Each girl knows what part to clean, what to leave. You wonder what part you'd pick if it came to that. Hands, face, or perhaps just one foot, the one that still believes in escape. A bell rings faintly. Shift change. Girls begin wrapping up. Rags squeezed dry, buckets refilled. They leave in twos, threes. One girl lingers, rubbing oil into her arms. You ask what it is. "Duck fat," she says, "keeps the skin soft." "Does it work?" She lifts her sleeve. You reach out and touch. Yes, it does. Before she leaves, she dips her cloth in rosewater one last time, squeezes it out, wipes behind her ears. "For luck," she murmurs. You follow her out into the hall again, where the heat of the night has crept in like a second skin. And somewhere behind you, the water in the basin begins to settle. Cloudy, still, used, but not wasted. Never wasted. The hallway stretches on, longer than it should be. Every step you take, the floor seems to slant a little more, as if the house itself is tired of holding these stories in its bones. You follow a trail of wet footprints, two left, one right, then a shuffle, and find yourself in a narrow chamber with cracked tile and iron hooks on the wall. The air here is damp, warm, and faintly metallic. At first, you think it's just another washroom. But no, this is the leaching room, and the woman in the corner, sleeves rolled, is holding a jar of very enthusiastic leeches. She sees you and smiles. "New?" she asks, gently tipping the jar so the leeches sway like dancers in slow water. "Don't worry. They rarely bite the wrong part." You raise an eyebrow. "I mean, sometimes they do," she adds brightly. "But that's life, isn't it?" She pats the cushion beside her. "Come, watch. Mainstream fact. Leeches were widely used in medieval medicine, especially in brothels, where female health was a matter of both profit and risk. Midwives and self-trained healers believed bloodletting could balance the humors, cure headaches, ease swollen groins, and even prevent pregnancy. Fringe tidbit: some women used leeches to reduce swelling in their labia or thighs before a high-paying client. Others applied them behind the ears, claiming it made the skin paler, more noble, more virginal. Historians still argue whether these uses were effective or just desperate acts dressed in tradition. The woman, who tells you her name is Roan, pulls a stool closer. She unwraps a cloth from her thigh. A bruise the color of eggplant spreads along her inner leg. She sighs. "This one's from a gentleman who fancied kicking," she says lightly. "And by gentleman, I mean barn beast in a doublet." She dips her fingers into the jar, plucks a leech with practiced grace, and sets it gently on her skin. It wriggles, then latches. Roan doesn't flinch. A young girl walks in with a trembling hand, holding another jar. "Put it by the fire," Roan says. "They like it warm," the girl does. She eyes Roan's leg. You think it'll help, Roan shrugs. Not the bruise, but it gives me 30 minutes of silence. That's worth something. You sit quietly, listening to the faint squelch as the leech settles into its job. Roan lights a small stick of dried sage and wafts it near her leg. They say it calms the nerves, she murmurs. But mostly, it keeps the madam from fainting when she sees the blood. You notice a tray nearby, filled with clean linen, thread, and bits of copper coin. For waiting, she explains. If the leech is lazy, we give him incentive. She giggles, just like the men. Another woman walks in, limping slightly. Back again, Roan asks. The woman nods and lowers her bodice. You see it then, a series of tiny dark bites, some still oozing. She reclines and places her own leech near her ribs. Roan hands her a strip of cloth to bite down on. They sit like that, side by side, bitten, drained, resting. A client once asked Roan what the marks were. She told him they were stars. He believed her, tried to count them, got to 9 before he passed out. The fire hisses softly. The girls begin to hum. You find yourself lulled into a strange calm, a kind of sisterhood in bloodletting, in bruises turned intentional. You ask Roan if it ever gets easier. She smiles. No, but it gets funnier. She gestures to the jar. You name them, and suddenly it's not so bad. She taps the side of the glass. This one's Hubert. Another girl arrives. She looks pale, fevered. Without a word, Roan motions her down, checks her pulse, and selects a leech. She places it gently behind the girl's knee. It'll cool her down, she murmurs. Or maybe it won't. But sometimes you have to believe in Hubert. Later, when the leeches are full and swollen, they're plucked off carefully and dropped into a side jar, the used jar. Some are saved for reuse. Some are not. Roan burns a scrap of linen, lets the smoke drift upward. For those that died in service, she says with mock solemnity. The girls chuckle, but their eyes are tired and a little grateful. You step out of the room quietly. A smear of blood clings to your boot. You don't wipe it off. Some things feel sacred in their own strange way. You move down the corridor again, past the basin room, past the leaching chamber, past a door that slams shut just as you approach, followed by muffled giggles, and the unmistakable thud of someone falling off a creaky bed. Then you smell it. Not rot, not sweat. Perfume, sort of. A scent that tries to be orange blossom, but collapses halfway into spoiled wine and boiled herbs. You follow it into a small room with tattered curtains, a broken hand mirror, and a vanity drawer stuffed with bottles. Welcome to the DIY perfume parlor. Or, as the girls call it, the stink war room. Inside, 3 women are elbow deep in a project. One holds a cracked glass vial. Another is mashing something, old petals, maybe with a rock. The third is blowing on a scrap of parchment to dry a freshly dabbed mixture of rosemary oil and pig fat. Smell this, one says, holding the parchment up to your nose. You do. Your eyes water. They cheer. Mainstream fact. perfume in the Middle Ages was both scarce and expensive. Prostitutes often had to create their own blends from kitchen scraps, foraged herbs, animal fats, and stolen droplets from noblewomen's discarded handkerchiefs, a popular base, rendered tallow, which stayed on skin longer whether you liked it or not. Fringe tidbit: some brothels brewed perfumes using fermented goat's milk and cloves, which they claimed distracted the senses. Others smeared underarms with basil and salt, not to stop the sweat, just to rebrand it. Historians still argue whether these scent strategies actually pleased clients or merely masked the truth long enough to take their coin. One girl, Elsa, holds up a dented pewter spoon. "Vanilla," she declares. You ask where she got it. "From a pie 3 weeks ago." She drops a tiny sliver into the pot, then stirs. Another girl, Maeve, adds a single red berry. "Just for color," she says. "Men think red smells expensive. They have a system here, not scientific, not safe, but a system. A table of little chalk marks tells which blends work best for which client type. Drunks, garlic, sweat, and something floral. Clerics, frankincense, and apple peel. Young fools, mint and rose water. Wives, husbands, anything but lilac. Lilac, apparently, reminds them of guilt. You pick up a bottle labeled the bishop's wife. It smells like honey and grave dirt. You put it down. Maeve grabs another vial, uncorks it, and dabs behind her ears. "It's for tonight," she says. Merchant with soft hands. He likes vanilla. Says it reminds him of cake. She pauses. "I hate cake." She dabs more. Another girl walks in carrying a basket of lemon peels and burnt feathers. "Found these near the bakery bin," she announces. The room cheers. Time to start a new blend. They begin the sacred rite, the mash. The peels go into a stone bowl. So do the feathers, a splash of wine, a spoon of pork grease, and a few dried chamomile buds. Then the mashing begins, with fists, with spoons, with elbows at one point. Laughter bubbles up like stew. "This is what power smells like," Elsa declares. Maeve corrects her. "This is what survival smells like." The room goes quiet for a moment. Then, softly, Elsa says, "Same thing." And everyone nods. The mirror on the vanity is broken. But that doesn't stop them. They hold up pieces of tin or spoons, angling to catch a glimpse of themselves. You watch Maeve trace a line of ash across her cheekbone. "It looks like shadow," she explains. "Shadow's mysterious." Elsa adds a dot of berry juice to her lips. "If it stains," she shrugs, "I'll just tell him I bit it." The bottles go back into their hiding spots, under beds, between floorboards, in the folds of their dresses. No one leaves them out. Not because they're worth money, but because they took time. And that's a rarer currency here. Before you leave, Maeve offers you a little vial. "For the road," she says. "It smells like hope, or rotting basil, depends on your mood." You take it, sniff, definitely rotting basil, but somehow not unpleasant. Outside, the hallway feels colder after the warmth of the perfume room. You tuck the vial into your sleeve, and just like that, you're part of the stink war too. The house grows quieter the deeper you go, but quieter doesn't mean calmer. It's the quiet of breath held, not breath released. A kind of tension lives here down in the guts of the brothel, past the rooms of laughter, beyond the perfume cloud, below the basin hall and the leaching jars. You reach a crooked staircase leading downward. The steps moan with every footfall, and the lantern on the wall barely holds a flame. You descend into the linen crypt. At least, that's what the girls call it. This is where the used sheets go, and the body cloths, and the things no one wants to touch, unless they absolutely must. A woman is already down there, sleeves rolled, mouth tied with cloth. She's boiling water in an iron pot the size of a coffin. Beside her, a wooden barrel filled with lumpy suds and mystery stains. You've arrived at the brothel's closest thing to a laundry. If you're imagining fresh lavender and crisp white cotton, turn back now. This place is more swamp witch than laundress. Mainstream fact. In many medieval brothels, linens were washed infrequently, either once a week or only when clients complained. Hot water was rare, soap even rarer. Most laundering was done with urine. Yes, really, ashes and river stones. Fringe tidbit. Some establishments rotated their sheets by color, not cleanliness. Pale meant newer. Brown meant experienced. Red, well, that was for the brave. Historians still argue whether brothels maintained cleaning schedules for hygiene or just to prevent infestations. Spoiler, it didn't really work. You stand by the fire as the woman, her name is Dina, plunges a long wooden stick into the pot. Steam rises. So does the smell. It hits you like a memory you never lived. Burnt soap, boiled lice, wet wool, sweat, and something that smells suspiciously like old broth. Dina doesn't flinch. She's humming a hymn under her breath. The cloth in the pot churns like something trying to escape. This one had twins on it, Dina says, poking it deeper. Boy and girl, if the stains tell true. You try not to imagine how she can tell, but she's probably right. Behind her, a series of strings hang from ceiling to floor, holding sheets that drip quietly into waiting buckets. Some are patched with rough stitches. Some are burned along the edges. You ask why. Bedbug purge, she replies. They hate fire more than soap. She pulls a sheet from the pot with iron tongs, wrings it halfway, then slaps it flat onto a rough table. She beats it with a stick, then folds it 3 times and places it on the less dirty pile. That's an actual category here. At one corner of the room, a smaller girl, maybe 15, sits with a needle and thread, repairing tears. She uses black thread on white linen. When you ask why, she shrugs. It looks like scars. She adds a small red X to the corner. For luck, you nod. It probably helps. Dina empties a new bucket into the pot this time. A mix of rainwater, stale beer, and something sticky that smells like tree sap. A recipe from my grandmother, she explains. Cleans the sins right out. Does it work, you ask? She grins. Cleaner than the priest's conscience. A fat cat wanders in, rubs against your leg, then hops onto the table and needs a half-dry sheet. No one ever cleans him, Dina mutters. Yet he's cleaner than most who visit. The girl with the needle glances up. Probably why he doesn't pay. The fire crackles, the pot boils, and you realize that this room, grim as it is, might be the heart of the whole place. Because here is where the evidence of every night is boiled, beaten, stretched, dried, and then laid bare in the open. There's no perfume here, no disguise, just truth. You run your fingers along a half-dry cloth. It's stiff, still smells faintly of salt and smoke, but someone will sleep on it tonight, and someone else will be born on it tomorrow, and maybe, just maybe, it'll get washed again next week. Before you leave, Dina tosses a pouch toward you. Lavender ash, she says, for your pillow. Helps with dreams. You thank her. She waves a damp rag in reply as you climb the stairs again. A single drop of water from a drying sheet falls onto your head. You don't wipe it off. Some stains you carry. Some you honor. The stairs groan beneath your feet as you rise from the laundry crypt. And with each step, the air thickens, not with steam or perfume this time, but with music, faint, uneven. A few notes at a time. A lute string plucked gently. You follow the sound down a dim hallway lit by flickering tallow candles. The flame casts long shadows of lace and stockings strung across a line, drying, perhaps, or simply displayed as trophies of the trade. At the end of the corridor is a room with no door. Only a curtain sewn from torn chemises and embroidered napkins sways gently like a sigh. Behind it, the final chamber. Not for clients, not for coin. This is the sanctuary. It's a small, low-ceilinged room with cushions scattered on the floor, oil lamps flickering low, and 3 women curled around a wooden box of keepsakes. Here, the girls come after everything else, after the sheets, the bruises, the bleeding, the perfume. This is where they shed the performance. No clients allowed. No madams either. Just girls. And the stories they carry. Mainstream fact. Many brothels had private restrooms for the workers, often tucked away, poorly ventilated, and dimly lit, but crucial. In these spaces, women exchanged news, shared advice, and sometimes wept or slept together in a heap like kittens, seeking warmth more than comfort. Fringe tidbit: some brothels kept secret journals, passed between workers, where each girl would scribble a thought, a warning, a drawing, or a prayer. Pages were often burned when filled. To keep secrets secret, historians still argue whether these spaces were tolerated by brothel owners or simply claimed by the women as acts of quiet rebellion. A girl plucks at the lute again. The string buzzes, another hums a lullaby, one her mother sang before the plagues came. You don't know the words, but your bones understand them. A candle flickers out. No one moves to relight it. Darkness is welcomed here. Elsa enters with a tray of crusty bread and watery broth. She passes bowls without speaking. A ritual. Everyone sips in silence. You sit among them, gently, careful not to disturb the fragile rhythm. From the keepsake box, Maeve pulls a yellowed scrap of parchment and reads aloud. He said I was a flower. Then he picked me. Then he left. Everyone nods. No one laughs. Not tonight. Another girl places a tiny cloth doll into the box. It's missing an arm. Someone asks if it's meant to be her. She shrugs. It's meant to be someone who makes it out. You look around the room and wonder how many of them still believe in that, how many just need to say they do to keep going. A girl with scarred hands sketches with a bit of charcoal on the floor. She draws a bird with no wings, then blows the dust away. Gone. The lute hums again. They tell stories, soft and strange, of a client who paid just to watch them eat soup, of a priest who confessed to them, of a cat that always sat on the lap of the girl who wouldn't survive the winter. Every story is both ridiculous and sacred. You laugh, and then you want to cry. Someone begins to braid hair. Someone else massages aching feet. It's not sensual. It's survival. Each touch says, I see you. Each silence says, I know. You look around and see a wall carved with initials and tally marks. No full names, just fragments of girls who came before. Some have hearts next to them, others crosses, a few stars. No one explains what they mean. You're not sure you want to know. The lute is quiet now. The bowls are empty. The oil is low. A girl curls into another's side and whispers something you don't catch. They both smile. And for a moment, a small, trembling moment, there's peace. Then a bell rings somewhere in the distance. The next shift begins. Some of the girls rise. Others stay. You do too. Because this room isn't for time or customers. It's for remembering you were a person before the coin hit the table. And maybe, just maybe, you still are. You lie back now, not on silk sheets or a feather pillow, but somewhere quiet inside yourself. The brothel fades. The footsteps above slow. The laughter turns to murmurs. The clinking cups, the boiling water, the lute strings, all dissolve into a gentle hush. You feel the weight of cloth on your chest, not shame, not memory, just fabric, worn and soft from too many hands. And beneath that, a slow, steady breath. Yours, still yours. Maybe you smell rosewater. Maybe it's just dust. But your body relaxes anyway, held by something older than comfort, something like truth. The girl who smeared basil under her arms, the one who whispered to a broken doll, the hands that combed lice, that wrung linens, that sewed scars with black thread. They're quiet now. And you are too. Let this stillness settle in your bones like warm tea. Let the flicker of oil light behind your eyes dim. You've walked corridors heavy with history. You've carried the weight of others' survival just for a while. Now you can rest, not because the world is gentle, but because you are, and you came through it. And now, in the hush between breaths, between stories, between worlds, you can sleep.